His work. Yeah. Good morning, everybody.
Nice morning.
This is social media, a new frontier for the modern actuary. I'm Frank Griffin, I'll be the moderator. I'm Director of Personal Owner Products at Verisk ISO in Jersey City. Our speaker today is Dominic Lee. He's an associate of the Casualty Actuarial Society with 10 years of experience across personal, commercial, and specialty insurance. In his current role as a senior actuary and senior solutions advisor at CAS, he provides domain experience to support advanced analytics and technology solutions sales for the insurance market. Dominic's personal mission is to unlock the power of the actuarial brand outside of traditionally defined spaces, and in the process, increase the influence, impact, and profile of actuaries on a global scale. He recently just delivered a professional TED-style talk entitled Beyond Insurance, in which today it has over 30,000 views on YouTube. Outside of actuarial, he enjoys reading, soccer, and producing blog content on social media. There'll be plenty of time at the end of the session to ask questions if you have questions. And please join me in welcoming Dominic.
Thank you for joining. How's my volume at the back? I always like to check. Good. Everyone good? Okay, so I like to start with a story. So I was moving to Ohio at the end of last year, and to be honest, I was a little bit busy with my exams. I called a single moving company to ask some questions, and they did convince me that they'd be able to fulfill the job. So I put my trust in them. I let them pack my stuff up, and I moved on over to Ohio to start a new chapter. One of the things they told me specifically was that they did not use brokers. Brokers are known to have bad business practices. And I put my trust in them, didn't do any research. Fast forward to a week later, I'm sitting at my window watching the driver drive off as my furniture is unassembled, sitting in my apartment. So, good job to me on that. In that instance, I didn't quite do my homework. I never did my research, I never used social media. But I can say with certainty that in this day and age, consumers are doing their homework and they are doing their research. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. Social media has empowered customers beyond belief. And that shift presents an opportunity that I'd like to share with you today. But first, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my mission. My personal mission is to help actuaries in general have more influence. When people, and I'm talking about people external to our profession, think of actuaries, they probably think of someone sitting in a back room, kind of working silently. What I want our profession to do is to be able to evolve, to be able to have more influence. So when there are cases that require critical risk decisions, if you think of what happened after the pandemic, I'm not sure how everyone felt, but I certainly felt that actuaries did not have as much of an impact as they could have. So what I'm doing, and one of the reasons I think that's the case is I don't think we've historically been great storytellers. We've been very good at analytics and critical thinking and had great technical skills, but we have not been great storytellers. So I really would like to help us transition to be, more in the spotlight and having more influence and in more critical decision making. So I'll talk through what we're gonna go through today. We're gonna start off, we're gonna break this presentation down into 3 pieces. I like to stick to the rule of 3. First, we're going to evolve. We're going to take a look at the external information landscape what that looks like. We're going to take a look internally at the strategy within our profession, and understand some changes that employers to really evolve as a profession to embrace the opportunity that is social media. That's evolve. Then we're going to align. I'm going to talk through the building blocks of social media analytics. I'm going to tell you what it is. I'm going to talk through a few specific examples. I'll explain why I think actuaries would add value in that space. And I'll give some advice to fill in some of the gaps that I think would need to be filled before we can really kind of get to scale there. And once we achieve alignment, once we close those gaps, then we can capture the value in social media data. And we'll do that using digital marketing, a very light digital marketing use case. First thing I want to talk about, evolve. When you think of the media landscape, there's been a seismic shift in the media landscape over the past few decades. Traditional forms of media were what I call one-to-many. When you think of print, radio, billboards, and television, the information was sent in one direction and the consumers did not have many choices. How many people are old enough to remember MTV? Yeah, remember, we can all remember going home, maybe watching TRL on a weekday. I don't know if anyone's old enough to remember that, but no, and we had no choice, right? We had to watch what they decided to play. We had no choice, but now we can do YouTube. One example, in many different ways. The landscape has really shifted, and it's what I call instead of one-to-many, it's really many-to-many. It's a very fluid dialogue. Information is moving in a number of different directions, and consumers are more empowered than ever before. Hence, they have leverage. In addition to that, I just want to talk quickly about what I call disintermediation. The middleman is going away. The internet's kind of removed the middleman. How many people here use an agent to purchase auto insurance? That answer probably would have been different a few years back. So that's an example of disintermediation once more. Customer having more power. And lastly, on the customer, what I'll mention is, I think anyone who works in insurance has heard this stat. 75%, with it by the year 2025, 75% of the global workforce is going to be millennials. So the nature of communication is going to change, and social media is millennials and Gen Zs are very, very heavy into that. So that's the consumer. That's the first external force. Also wanted to mention, 33% of the time on the internet is spent on social media. That's what I alluded to. And 92% of all customer interactions happen by phone. So when you think of that mixture of the phone and social media. Now let's talk about data. 2.5 quintillion bytes of data are generated online every day. To put that into perspective, if I had 2.5 quintillion pennies laid flat, that's enough to wrap around the earth 5 times stacked. That's how much data we're generating every day. So we have a lot of data. Understandably, there's a lot of noise in that data, but there's certainly some signal, there's some business value that we can find. A more salient point on that is only 5% of that data is structured. And if everyone here, how many people work in insurance here? A lot of people, right? So would it be correct to say that you're primarily working with structured data, kind of relational databases, right? So think of the possibilities, the untapped possibilities out there, if only 5% of the data is structured. And that's kind of the realm that we're playing in. Analytics, another external force. Artificial intelligence is an augmented form of analytics that helps us to process different data forms, unstructured forms, whether it's images, video, and audio, forms that we haven't looked at much in the past. AI capabilities today are trending upwards. There's a lot of AI capabilities and it's only increasing in importance. In fact, the AI market's expected to grow by 33.2% compound annual growth rate from 2020 to 2027. So it's projected to grow. It's important. It's here to stay. That's the analytics piece. Now that we've looked externally, let's take a look internally. We're trying to figure out why we need to evolve. When we think of the CAS strategic plan, analytics is one of the pillars of that. So analytics in general, one of the things that I know, not just the CAS, but the other actuarial bodies want actuaries to do is to develop analytics. And when I say analytics, I mean advanced analytics, those kind of skills to really be more nimble and flexible and solve problems. So whether, not just if you work outside of insurance, but even think of problems in insurance that you could perhaps solve. Better understanding of loss cost or pricing and exposures. So that's a really important focus for the CAS, leveraging unstructured data. I've taken a look at that a few times. This one's also interesting, and I'll admit, slightly subjective. One of the things, so I've been in the profession for 10 years, and I've noticed that when I compare how many people are interested in the profession in 2021 compared to 2011, there's been an explosion in interest in the profession. Universities are also getting a lot better at preparing candidates for exams and for the profession. The question is the demand for the traditional insurance jobs commensurate with the available supply? And that's an open question, I'll admit. I don't have hard evidence of that, but from my observations in the market, and does that observation surprise anyone? I want to get the audience's take, kind of seen. Something that I've noticed over the past few years, lots of interest in the profession. So I think because of that gap that I'm projecting, that non-traditional opportunities will increase in relevance. That's my my hypothesis. So I think that makes this a relevant topic here. So when we talk about social media, we think of Facebook, Instagram, the basics, but it's not limited to Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. It could be discussion online forums like Reddit, review sites like Yelp, and it can go a lot broader. So my definition of social media is not necessarily the very tight, complex version. It's a little bit more expansive, and it covers the entire ecosystem. And it presents challenges. Social media is a challenging concept from an analytics and data perspective for a few reasons. The data itself, the volume and the velocity, you're collecting millions of records in real time, and that presents a challenge. The diversity, you're collecting a lot of different types of information. Image, audio, text, it's multilingual. It's a lot of diversity there. And then it's unstructured. Another common challenge is measuring return on investments. As you know, when it comes to social media, you're not just talking about investing $1 and getting $2 or $3 back. You're talking about things like likes, shares, subscribes, things that are not always easy to quantify. So that can be another challenge. But challenges present opportunity. So a recent study interviewed a lot of senior leaders and determined that the two gaps to take analytics from business value were data processing and advanced modeling skills. Sound about right? Actually, you're wrong. I tricked you there, right? It's actually converting the analytics to business actions, and then making business decisions based on the reactions to what you did. So business actions and the business decisions is the gap, based on what is being set in the marketplace. And that's a tremendous opportunity, I think, for actuaries. Because who better to translate or to extract business value from analytics than actuaries, right? We're trained as multidisciplinary business individuals. So I think this is a great opportunity here. Okay. So now that we've evolved, we've understood the external and internal forces that implore us to evolve. Let's try to find alignment. So social media analytics, I'll just talk quickly about what social media analytics is. It really is just the art, it's important. Two words are important, art and science. It's not purely science, it's art. It reminds me a lot of property and casualty, right? You know, part science, part art. And the whole purpose is to improve decision making. So it's not just doing analytics for a user's purpose. It's for a very specific reason, to improve business decision making. So the ecosystem itself consists very broadly of 8 categories of analytics. And to keep it simple, I've tried to group it into 4 pieces. And I'll go into detail on 4 of them. So I'll start from the left. We have our expressions, essentially any expression you do by text, video, audio, or image. Analytics on those. And then I'll go to the right. We have measurement. So that's understanding, kind of trying to quantify your engagement. So what is a like, a share, a subscribe? What are those things worth? Which is kind of neat when you think of it, right? It's not something that's very mainstream, but it kind of has value, and I'll talk through that. And then the mobile too, how you engage with that. Then there's position. There's a network, where you are in the virtual network relative to others in the network. And then location, where you are in physical space. That's position, that's the third. And then fourth is information. How do you search for information, and how does traffic flow from your website to your app, which is hyperlink. So we're gonna go through 4 of them. We're gonna go through text, actions, network, and search. Okay, so text. This one is really important, and I put it first. So unstructured text, the largest human-generated data source. So it's critically important. There's a lot of value, potentially, within this information here. So text analytics utilizes natural language processing, which is a branch of artificial intelligence. It's essentially a way of interpreting and analyzing human language, kind of linking the computers to the human language. And text analytics can be used to really understand consumer behavior. So if you think of all the different forms of feedback we get, you can get a tweet, you can get a Facebook comment, you can get a website review. You can get a website review, and that can provide insight to companies on products and services. And what's even cooler is that then you can actually integrate that with transactional structured data to develop even more comprehensive insights. So if you think of, I think the example I came up with earlier is like just a simple example, like a call center. Like if they had like a call log, if that's structured, I'm not even sure if that's structured, but assuming that that's structured, and they were to kind of integrate that with like a website review, then you get a more complete picture of the customer. And better be able to adjust your service if they need to. So this works. So text analytics, there's really 4 basic steps. So there's identifying the source of the text. Depending on the source, whether it's a tweet, a document, or something on a website, the way that the information is extracted might differ. So you have to identify what that is. And then you have to parse the text. You have to parse and filter it and create a vocabulary of words, essentially. And then you transform it into a readable form for the computer using kind of linear algebra techniques, which I won't get into detail, but it's translated. And then you extract using clustering, association, and sentiment analysis So does clustering, question for the crowd, does clustering sound familiar? Anyone who did exam aid, I hope I'm not bringing up any nightmares, right? So similar techniques, right? So you're starting to see some overlap here. You're starting to see that an actuary's skills could actually be applicable within this space. Same thing, same kind of k-means clustering procedures that you're doing there. Association, kind of saying that if somebody selects option A and option B, they're, have a certain likelihood of selection option C. So kind of co-occurrence kind of analysis. And then sentiment analysis. Really trying to, so sentiment analysis essentially looking at the text, and the result is typically something called a net promoter score. So essentially it's on a scale of, sometimes it's 0 to 1, 0 to 10. If you're on the lower end of the spectrum, then you're not getting great feedback. When you're on the top end, you're doing well. So companies, what's neat is that companies can use this kind of analysis and integrate to their business rules. So it is a very powerful tool. I will say about text analytics, it's, as with any form of analytics, it's not perfect. There's some nuance to it. As you know, there's different cultures might spell words differently, or language might have different interpretations and context. So it's not 100% accurate. As of 2014, I believe it was roughly 75% accurate. So there's a little bit of uncertainty, which I think pretty sure we're used to dealing with as actuaries. So that's text analytics, very important. Yeah, so I talked about predicting insights into consumer behavior, essentially, using that paradigm. Now let's talk about actions analytics. From the research that I've done, I would say that this is definitely the most untapped area. This is the only area I really haven't found a public use case. Most of the like text analytics you can find public use case, publicly documented use case where a company or someone did something, but this is one where I think there's a ton of opportunity. So if you think of actions, essentially your likes, your shares, your comments, tags, all of those things that you do when you see content on social media. So the question is, how can we kind of make meaning of that from an analytics perspective? Because remember, business value is ultimately the goal, right? We're not just doing analytics for fun. It can be fun, right? But it's ultimately, there's an end goal in mind. So the first one I wanted to take a look at was social share. But first I have to define two terms. So a mention is just pretty much anytime you get tagged on social media, mention, whether it's a formal tag or a mention on the web, that's a mention. And an impression, anyone know what an impression is? Yeah? Yes?
You want me to say?
Yeah, sure.
Well, impression is essentially when your brand name or image actually shows up anywhere in the app or on the page that the users are looking at.
I would actually say that's more of a mention. An impression is like how many times, if I post a piece of content and you view it once, then that's one impression, but if you view it twice, that's two. So this is essentially how many times my content has been viewed. That's the technical definition of an impression, but just wanted to level set on that. So the first KPI here is social share, and essentially it looks at, a brand can use this to look at how their mentions are compared to the total mentions within their industry. So this is the denominator would involve their mentions and any other companies within their industry. So it's essentially just giving a barometer of how relevant the brand is, because of course if people are talking about you, then you're relevant. You can think of like a Tesla, the brands that people are always talking about. So that's one. And then we have the second one, the virality rate that I have. So essentially, it's the number of shares for your post divided by the number of impressions. So it's really measuring engagement. It's saying, do people just look at your post and just do nothing, or are they actually propagating that through the network and kind of spreading that information, whatever it is that you're putting out there, the ether. So that measures engagement. As you can see within the actions, there's different types of business value just depending on, and that will depend on what, companies might have different goals. So that's why it's relevant to kind of contextualize what the business value is. This one's really important. Cost per conversion. So essentially, you're taking a look at how much you're spending on an ad, and you're comparing that to how many conversions that you're having. So it's almost like a gauge of, not just a gauge of efficiency, but I think of it more of like a digital acquisition cost. So I guess in insurance, you could think of like your commission and anything that you have to do, whatever price you have to pay to really get a customer in the door. So that's a really important thing, a really important metric, because it's going to inform, as you'll see later on, it's going to inform like your strategic direction and some of the decisions that you make when you place ads. And then Net Promoter Score. So this is consumer driven. If you want to understand what the customers are thinking of your company. I mentioned that sentiment analysis can be used 0 to 10. Remember, the lower end of the range is not as good. Top end of the range is good. You get good feedback. Can be done with sentiment analysis and with other methods as well. So we have 4 metrics here: relevance, engagement, conversion, and consumer. Just a few simple examples, and there's many others that I've seen, but I just wanted to share one of each with you to give you an idea of what actions analytics is and how it might be used. Okay, this one's interesting. So network analytics talks about the overall structure of a network and how information flows through it. And I think it's good to start off with a simple example. So if you think of, so the circles themselves, think of it as like just representing your presence on social media. So let's just say it could be your Twitter page or LinkedIn page. So the circles are just representing kind of your position. So if you think of the global actuarial network, these are like the 3 major players. And intuitively you would think that they're connected, right? There's some degree of connection between them. But if I expanded to look at the global network beyond just the societies, then you may actually find different pockets of connection with different strengths. So you may find pockets where you have an influencer or someone who's connected to a few people and is distributing information. Or you may have other pockets where people are connected in different ways, just kind of equally. And one thing, so a couple of things that you can do with networking analysis. Like the first thing that I always like to mention is there's a statistic called density. So essentially, what the density of the network measures is how many connections, how many people are connected within a network divided by all of the possible connections. So if the density is a 0, then you don't really have much connection. If it's 100%, then everyone's tightly connected. So this measure can just be used to understand like what the strength of connection is. Like if is information going across a network analytics, like I said, you can really understand just the flow of information. It's important because there's different types of networks. Like for instance, you'd expect a professional network to have a different structure to a dating network, right? Because the goal is different, and to a friendship network. So that's the whole idea here. And as I mentioned, the structure, the overall structure, which I just alluded to, whether it's like a business network versus a friend network, the connections, the strength and the density of those connections, and then the information flow. So if you want to be able to get a message across, then, and if you understand how that network works, that's advantageous to you. You know who the influencers are, you know where the knowledge gaps are, then you can kind of tackle those. So that's why network analytics is relevant. And then the final one is search analytics. Not a surprising statistic, 75 to 80% of web purchases originate from a search engine. So essentially when you're online, if you have when you're on social media, a website is always a part of your product typically. And if you want to be competitive, because there's many different websites of whatever your business is, you want it to be easy for you to be found. So for you to kind of rise, to be able to be highly ranked on a page, like when someone enters your business, your website's going to need to have the right keywords. So one branch of search analytics is what you call search engine optimization. So companies will typically do research on the keywords that they include within their website, and that's an analytical problem if you think of it. And then there's other objective criteria too, like kind of how they design the website, lay things out. But the gist of it is that you want to be able to have a high rank so you can connect with customers. And social media is actually a piece of that. If you have a good amount of interaction on your mobile apps, then that does affect your page rank positively as well. I talked about the search engine optimization. There's trend analysis. So kind of, if you think of Twitter and what's trending, that's kind of like the trend analysis. Keyword monitoring, I kind of alluded to that, just doing research on the keywords, kind of making sure that your website's intact. And then advertising spend statistics. So I'm going to talk a little bit. This ended up in kind of a weird place. There's really no clean place to put it, but advertising is really important on social media. So the way advertising happened in the past is, you buy an ad slot in the paper, and regardless of who sees it, you pay a fixed price. In today's world, it's really, in the digital world I should say, it's really more of a pay-per-click model. So essentially you kind of bid for the ad, and if someone clicks on it, then you pay, but if they don't, then you don't. So it's something that's important, kind of as you're placing ads, and kind of thinking of your cost per conversion and those dynamics. I'll just give you one example to kind of I guess to demystify that. So when Google started I think Google started like 2001. The cost per click was like 5 cents. So think of that. It was really whoever was an early adopter back then was able to essentially get customers to click on their website for like a very low price and potentially convert them. And when you think of, you can start doing comparisons, like you can kind of understand, well, how much does it cost to acquire a customer? Then what's the long-term value, right? If you think of like a retail store, if they're acquiring a customer really cheaply, they're going to be getting a good amount of money out of them in the long term. And that's actually what Amazon did, in case you're interested. Amazon actually went all into Google AdWords, which is a specific application of it. They actually outspent eBay by a multiple of 30. So I personally think that that's one of the reasons, one of the contributing factors towards Amazon's success is they understood that, I wouldn't call it attention, but they understand that the customer acquisition cost back then was fairly low, and there was some arbitrage, and then they tapped into that. Okay, so oops, sorry. Okay, so I tried to put together an example to tie together the 4 things that we just learned. Who here has seen the Netflix show Squid Game? Okay, good. All right, so I came up with an example to kind of tie together all the pieces of social media analytics. So let's say Squid Game. When Squid Game comes out, first thing that happens is people start posting, right? Someone says, hey, Squid Game is good. There you go. You got text, you got mobile interactions, you got multimedia, right? Because you're typing, it's on the phone, it's going through the network, right? Then the next thing happens is what Netflix will do. So let's just say Netflix recognizes that Squid Game goes viral, right? First, there's expressions, and then it goes viral because there's a lot of actions that happen. And then Netflix notices that Squid Game went viral, and it does some network analysis. It takes a look at the recommendation engine, which is a very specific application of network analysis, and then updates their engine. So engine gets updated, and there's actions that make it go viral. Now let's say a retailer who's very tech savvy uses location analytics to understand where the specific pockets of interest lie for like a Squid Game Halloween costume, right? It was very, very famous in this past week or so. So they figure out using location analytics where the pockets of interest lie. And then they decide to place an advanced purchase order through their supply chain. And then their customers, who like to search for it on their phone, that's search. And then their customers who like to search for it on their phone, that's search. And then their customers who like to search for it on their phone, that's search. And then their customers who like to search for it on their phone, that's search. And then their customers who like to search for it on their phone, that's search. And then their customers who like to search for it on their phone, that's search. And then their customers who like to search for it on their phone, that's search. And then their customers who like to search for it on their phone, that's search. And then their customers who like to search for it on their phone, that's search. And then their customers who like to search for it on their phone, that's search. And then their customers who like to search for it on their phone, that's search. And then their customers who like to search for it on their phone, that's search. And then their customers who like to search for it on their phone, that's search. And then their customers who like to search for it on their ph and everybody gets their costumes, and they're happy, right? So, there you have it, that's the ecosystem, practically speaking. Okay, so what I want to talk about, we've gone through the building blocks of social analytics. Now we're going to talk about why I think actuaries add value briefly, and then I'll talk about some gaps I think we need to fill to be able to step into this opportunity. Analytical toolkit, that one's a no-brainer. We as actuaries have a very high actuarial acumen. We're used to contextualizing data, and I don't think we use anything that's not adjusted, right? The premiums on level, the losses are trending, right? We're used to doing all that stuff. So we have a very deep analytical toolkit. We also have a multidisciplinary skill set. So as you can see, within this ecosystem itself, there's a lot of different disciplines that interplay. Actuaries are not just doing mathematical types don't just have a mathematical background, they have to understand economic finance. So they're kind of trained and conditioned to be multidisciplinary. And then strategic thinking, really understanding, and this is where I think it comes in from a business perspective, really being able to apply things, to strategically problem solve using analytics. Now what about the gaps? There are some gaps that I think need to be filled. The first one is data. As I mentioned before, data in a big data world is often unstructured. In today's world, actuaries don't work with unstructured data as much. That's the first thing. So one common example is if you think of like a typical relational database, like your kind of Teradata, very cleanly structured table, being able to evolve from that kind of view to what I showed within the network analysis, right? Kind of like a graph database, which is what Facebook does, right? That's the kind of views that they do. But to be able to kind of understand that. And the good thing is that the tools are there, but just being able to kind of have a mindset shift to be able to adapt to the conditions. That's data. I like this one, analytics. So, understanding the capabilities out there when it comes to AI, there's tremendous capabilities. There's just really understanding what's out there. I'm not thinking of technology in really an adversarial way. I think sometimes we tend to think that technology is the bad, not anyone in this room, but collectively speaking, sometimes within the profession, people think that that technology is going to just replace human beings, and I don't think that's the case. I think there are some things that technology does well. Of course, the processing power, doing all the computations, figuring out the interrelationships between variables, but nothing can really replace the human judgment at the end of the day. So in my mind, it's not a competition, as I've heard in the past, it's not a competition between man versus machine. It's really working as a co-technician, complementary skills. And then a couple of things I'll mention too. So another mental paradigm shift that I would say has to happen is, like if you work in insurance, if you're not working in data science or on the research side, you probably work with a GLM and you see that it's updated maybe once every few years. Is that kind of a reasonable assumption for people who are not in R&D? Yes, no? Yeah. But in a big data world, models are like being retrained weekly. So it's just a quicker way of operating, and what you call, I think is called model drag. Like the models can become degraded very quickly, because in a big data environment, when there's just so much data coming in on a daily basis, the relationships can change much more quickly. So, and then the third thing, this is actually really important, and Dr. Siegel mentioned it, is in insurance, understandably so, for regulatory reasons and otherwise, causation is critically important. So we always think of, okay, well, why something changed, why did it change? Give me a reason A, B, and C. In a big data world, sometimes correlations are enough, and that's important to know. It doesn't mean that it replaces causation all the time, but having that a more dynamic mindset when it comes to correlation and causation, and understanding that sometimes correlation is enough, is important. important. I'll give you an example of that. So UPS has like 60,000 a fleet of 60,000 vehicles, and as you could imagine, if any of the vehicles goes down, that causes a huge disruption in their process. And what they were doing initially, they were just on a routine basis replacing the parts every 2 to 3 years. But what happens is they were wasting a lot of money, because as you could imagine, like some of them needed to be replaced, some of the vehicles, the parts of the vehicles, but some didn't. So they started integrating predictive analytics. And they ended up saving millions of dollars. And the point I want to make about that is they were monitoring the vehicles in real time and collecting a lot of data on them. They weren't able to say exactly why the vehicles needed to be changed, but they would be able to say, okay, well, this is overheating, so vehicles A, D, and E need to be replaced. They never said that it was overheating because of a frayed fan belt or a poorly screwed cap. That's causality, right? It was correlation, and that was good enough to save them money. So that's the kind of shift I'm talking about when you talk about correlation or causation. And lastly, this one is kind of near and dear to my heart, is actuaries tend to want to build tools, right? Familiar with that concept. But the technology is there. I think we just need to have more of a discussion and dialogue about the technologies that are out there. And not just the technology, we need to rethink what productivity means. So oftentimes, when we think of tools, we think of, okay, well, that costs too much money to buy. I'll just build it in-house. So it's a shorter cost today. But if you think of simple NPV analysis, you've got like an NPV analysis, in the longer term, it'd be better for you to buy the solution, because you're losing a lot of productivity in the next few years, right? You have the actuaries doing visual basic and things that are not innately actuarial. So I think if actuaries would really kind of take a step back, and I'm not talking about just all actuaries, of course, the decision makers are consequential here, because I'm not telling you to go back to your job and say, I'm not going to build this tool, right? Don't do that. So yeah, that's the third shift that I think we need to happen. Okay, so now that we've evolved to meet the needs of the market, and that we've aligned our skills to meet the opportunity that is social media, let's just briefly talk about a digital marketing use case, and then I'll take the questions. When you think of digital marketing, or at least when I thought of it, when you think of marketing broadly speaking, whether it was a decade or two ago, you probably think of someone creating a flyer, right? You just think of someone trying to get your attention, maybe placing an ad. Or maybe you think of it from, anybody watch Mad Men? Yeah, like a Don Draper kind of, right? Ad agency kind of. So you don't think of it from an analytical perspective. The Economist did a recent study, and they found that I think it was 70 to 80% of executives said that analytics for sales and marketing was either important or very important. And I thought that was really interesting, because when you think of, maybe I'm too stereotypical, when you think of people in those industries, you kind of think more of the talking skills. You don't really think from an analytics perspective, but it's true, and it's important, because someone in marketing and sales who does like the core job may not have the time and may not have the skills to really take the time to understand the data. And that's why I think that this is a prime example of an opportunity. So it looks more like this in the digital world, a little bit less purely creative. Well, there's some analytics as well. So what are some of the things that you need to consider from a digital marketing perspective? It really starts, and I don't have this on the side, it really starts with your goals. If you think back to when we talked about relevance, we talked about conversions and the consumer. The neat thing with social media is that in the past, the goal was always just sales. But in today, it's a bit more multifaceted, right? You could be sales. If you think of, I'm just gonna volunteer the CAS, right? It's whether the CAS or another actuarial organization. The goal might be membership, right? It's a little bit softer. It's not necessarily just the dollars. So you have to be able to align your value chain essentially with your goals, and that starts, of course, with a plan and a budget. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail, as you know. So you have to think of, how am I going to, based on my goal, how am I going to staff when it comes to digital marketing? Do you want to, are you doing like content that's very heavy on the creative side? If that's the case, then maybe you need an art director and a copywriter, right? Those are some of the decisions that you have to make. What kind of staff do you know, where do you kind of deploy your dollars? From a timing perspective, this one is actually interesting. I think on Facebook for sure, the ad, you can actually determine how long that your ads are running. So that's something that you have to consider, and that would that does impact your bid prices and then potentially your spread. So you have to understand how long, if I'm going to run an ad, depending on what my goal is. If I'm trying to sell a product quickly, then you may have to do it within a compressed time frame, but then you may risk losing money. So that's another analytical problem as well within there. Paid partnerships. I really like this one. In the past, it was all about, you know, Hollywood celebrities and musicians and stuff, but in today's world, you can actually do a paid partnership with an influencer at a lower cost, and you can actually get more lift, which is interesting, right? We probably, everyone in here probably knows of an influencer that you have no idea why they're famous, but they're carrying 10, 15 million followers with them. So that's a shift in how you think about a marketing budget. And then mix of spend. Thinking of what I call like the distribution versus the creative. So the distribution is just how much you spend on ads itself. And then the creative is how much do you spend to actually make the ad or the content itself. So clearly, the mix of that, if you're going, for instance, you're going 80% on distribution, 20% content, maybe the content is not that great. If you're going 60-40, you're not really, you don't have as much distribution, but your content is probably more contextual, and it might be more sticky. You might be able to get followers who eventually do propagate your content, and then you can build up a bigger network that way. So, to me, these are very analytical decisions that need to be made, and that you don't like. You probably don't typically think of this when it comes to social media. You just think of being on Facebook or Instagram. But I think these are interesting. And then the content itself, I'll just talk about a couple of these. Organic versus paid. Are you gonna do something that's, if you do something that's organic, then you're kind of fighting against the algorithm, right, which isn't really helpful. But if it's paid, then you can be more targeted in terms of who you send it to. And then what platforms do you use? Right? Do you have visual users, and maybe it's Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, or is it business, and maybe it's LinkedIn? So there's analytical techniques that you can certainly use to help you understand. I think like attribution analysis is one, where you can kind of chart the path of a customer's journey and really understand how much time they spend interacting with one platform versus the next. So I think that's a really interesting problem. And then the ads themselves. So typically when it comes to ads, the mindset is, what you want to do is, you really want to maximize the traffic for the people who are more likely to convert, of course. You want to minimize the traffic or eliminate the traffic from those who are not going to interact or convert. And segmentation is important in that, and we're good at segmentation, but segmentation is important because you can have a lot of traffic coming to your website, but if your ad groups are not segmented in the appropriate way, then you may be pulling in suboptimal traffic and people are not converting. So that's another type of optimization problem. And the last thing I'll mention on this is I have A to Z plus testing. So essentially, anyone here has heard of A/B testing? Yeah, there you go. So the whole idea is, I'll give an example. Essentially, you have a target. Say you want to convert. You target your conversion rate. And I give you 3 options. I give you a cashback option, a discount option, or like a 25% off the first year. You can actually run those in parallel. You can select a baseline variable and figure out what the lift is among those options. So that's what they do in marketing is A/B. And I call it A to Z because if you think of content and all the possible combinations you have across the platforms, across the demographic space, you can really do some interesting things, and I think really target, really work towards whatever your goals are, whether that's sales or subscriptions, follows, whatever that might be. So to recap, we evaluated the environmental factors that implore us to evolve as actuaries. We talked about social media as an opportunity, how we can align that with our skill sets, fill in any gaps, and then we talked about a specific use case to capture the value in social media data. So my call to action to you is really simple. I wanted to introduce this topic to the community, but I really think the general theme is that analytics is a step in the right direction for the actuarial community, and social media analytics is just one specific example. So if you found this message of value, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And remember, two more things I'll mention. Expand your range as a problem solver and improve your marketability, analytics, right? And remember, always shoot for the moon. If you miss, at least you'll land amongst the stars. Questions? Yes,
I'm
Matt.
just curious on the network analysis.
Yeah.
What business problem for insurance companies would that kind of analysis solve? The flow of data on the internet, basically.
Interestingly enough, the one that I thought of was, because I mentioned the recommendation engine. I think it could actually solve like line of business problems. Like if there's an opportunity for you to upsell them, maybe there's some exposure that's indicated by their presence on social media. That could be like an example. So essentially kind of like understanding the network and what they're connected to. Because when you think of retail, that's kind of how retail works. Like when you go on your Amazon shopping cart, that's kind of network. That's network analytics is the foundation of that. So that's one example I could think of off the top of my head, but there could be others as well. Hey, what's up?
We spoke a lot about marketing. I was curious if you have some insights into other applications like fraud detection.
Fraud detection is, I would imagine, well, AI, I would say more broadly speaking, AI in general, fraud is one of the most common use cases. Other use cases, like if you think of things like market research, product design, really just understanding what's out there in the marketplace, what's the demand for new product. There's plenty of, like, the possibilities are endless. Do you have a specific question on fraud, or like just
curious on
Yeah.
just picking your brain on other applications that could be opportunities.
For me, I think of like just that like I said, market research kind of product stuff. What else? I've heard of some other interesting ones, like I've heard sentiment analysis being used to project or forecast box office revenues, which I thought was interesting. I've heard that one. I've heard there's a company also called Faircast, and what they did is so how the company got started, it was a guy who was disgruntled because he went on a flight and someone purchased a ticket after him and they paid a lower price. It was the same type of seat. So what he did was he looked at like multiple years of travel data, and he like essentially created a model. And this is like a good example of the correlations versus causation. I didn't tell you why, but it just told you when, based on the data, predicted when you should buy a ticket to minimize your price. And it was so successful that Microsoft actually purchased the company, which I thought was interesting. Another example for search, Google actually used search analytics. I don't know, I'm assuming they did this thing with COVID, but they when swine flu, so this was what, 2008, 2009, they used the search terms to really understand that swine flu was a thing and kind of where, I guess, resources needed to be allocated and dedicated. So that's another example. So those are a few examples that I can think of. Yeah, sure.
Are there any ethical concerns that you see with the digital marketing? You know, I've heard of how search results can change just based on your location, and you were mentioning kind of like targeted ads, kind of just based on
Yep.
the engagement of who's around you.
Yep.
Curious to see your thoughts.
Yeah, no, it's a really important question. I think more broadly speaking, I don't know if Malika is in here, but I know Malika always talks about this. Like ethical AI is a really, because I work at SAS now, so I'm in analytics. And it's a very serious thing. I know, like sometimes AI gets a bad rap because what they always use the example of the Amazon hiring with the training data. You hear that example all the time, but what you don't know is that, or what you might not know, I should say, is that there's an entire infrastructure around ethical AI. There are model interpretability techniques that you can use to detect bias. There's models for scoring bias. So there's a lot of infrastructure around kind of solving that problem and making sure that companies are not crossing the line. Now, of course, I'm not saying no one ever will, but I'm just saying that it's like ethical AI is being taken seriously within the core analytics community right now. Hey, Malika, how are you?
I was just gonna like speculate to that question
Yeah.
as well. Like I was thinking about the network
Yeah.
analysis and just that picture that you put up there.
Yep.
And to the extent that you're using, networks to make decisions on like how and who you market to.
Yep.
That could create some interesting proxies for different, like we talked about protected classes and things like that.
Yeah.
If a network is homogeneous, that also means that you might end up marketing to, a homogeneous group where you didn't intend to do that. So I think it's just another lesson that like you have to do that exploration.
Absolutely, and I think, and that's a good point. You mentioned exploration. A lot of these analytics, the very advanced analytics platforms out there, they put a tremendous amount of rigor into that exploration process so that you can account for outliers, bias, all the different attributes, skewness, whatever, anything that you need to know about a variable. That infrastructure is in place. It's something that's on the top of people's minds. But what I'll also say is that, like when it comes to AI, don't think of it as something that's different from a GLM, right? When I think of like models, the model's only as good as the input data and how you retrain it and how you I guess you could say score it based on very objective criteria. So ultimately, like I said, that human insight and input is very important. So once you have a handle on that, then I think that we can untap the power of AI. It's not perfect, but like I said, it's a balancing act. You have to have all these. You have to keep track of all these things. There's privacy concerns, all of these things. As long as you have a handle on it, the infrastructure in place to know what you need to look at, then you can get good outcomes. Sure.
Kind of to go along with that, but when you are, making decisions based just on correlation and not understanding the
Yeah.
causation that's underlying that.
Yes.
Maybe it's covered by what you were just
Sure.
talking about, but
Sure.
like the ethical concerns behind that, you might, if you don't fully understand
Yeah.
what's happening,
Yeah.
you could be creating more issues.
Yeah. So let's use two examples. Like a very light example is that projection of the flight price. Like to me, that use case is very simple. I don't think if the price is misprojected, that's going to do disproportionate harm. But let's just say if we were evaluating a critical aircraft carrier and those parts. Okay, now causation is important, right? So it depends on the use case. That's a good point. It does depend on the use cases. So it's never all correlation or all causation. It's very situational. Sure.
So if an insurer, for example, was starting to use more of this social media unstructured data,
Yep.
like to what extent do you
That's a really tough question. The part I struggle with is, if you think of it, these apps do notify you when, like, or they prompt you, they say, will you allow us to collect the information? So technically, you would typically get prompted, so then, in my opinion, there's a personal responsibility, but then to your point, perhaps there's consumer protection, so it's a tough one. I don't know what the answer is. I think the more you can do as a company or a stakeholder to really just be transparent, then the better. But I think there also is some responsibility on the individual consumer. That's my personal take. I think social media in general just gets a read. I'm not trying to, just because I'm identifying an opportunity, I'm not like campaigning for social media, but I think it gets a bad rap sometimes because people don't want to take responsibility for their own actions. So to me, that's a balancing act. Yeah, sure.
Kind of along those lines, in a world where people are more and more often like opting for privacy and like not choosing to share their data, do you have concerns with bias in any of the predictions that you're building because of that?
Say that one more time. Sorry, I didn't hear the first part. Yeah.
Do you have any concerns with bias around the fact that people are choosing to opt out of providing that data rather than like the data sets you're working with are now limited because?
Yeah. The reason I personally don't is because I'm aware of the techniques that exist in the market to be able to sift out bias. I mean, they even have there are even capabilities to build surrogate models to figure out what a black box model is doing. The technology is really tremendous when you think of it. It's still not perfect, but I'm confident that there's techniques out there that can at least help to alleviate that issue. Nothing, Colin? I see you. I just want to say real quick. Yeah, just leaving some resources for your journey in case you want to start your analytics journey today. Coursera, Udemy, Kaggle, those are a couple of good resources to start with. And also, you can find me on LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram at Maverick Actuary, Snapchat and Twitter at Maverick Actuary, and by email. So follow my journey, and I'll certainly be researching this topic more and hopefully introducing more new topics to the actuarial community.
Presentation. Please fill out the survey. Before the trip to the San Diego Zoo today, there is a celebrating diversity reception in the same place where we have breakfast. If you're interested in meeting some of our diversity groups and being an ally, please come enjoy.